Hello to all my dear followers. Welcome to the second season of What If Naruto Fell in Love with Konan and Was Banished from Konoha? Please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me a lot. Now then, enjoy!
Chapter 9, Links. Exile Chapter 9, Bonds. The group arrived at the training grounds, a stark reminder of Naruto's past as number 7. But it was entirely different from his previous training grounds with his first team. Rocks and flat terrain were its defining features. On the way there, none of them wanted to speak. Naruto perhaps because he didn't really know where to begin. Samui troubled by the enigma of Uzumaki Naruto, now a new member of her team. Omoi and Karui exchanged doubts mentally due to their leader's strange behavior. Normally cold but focused, he now seemed at odds with the outside world. Naruto decided to break the ice in the same way his sensei, Kakashi, had done in the past. How about we start by properly introducing ourselves? He suggested, sitting down on a random rock. The group looked puzzled. I mean, you already know each other, but you don't know me and I don't know you. It would be best if we introduced ourselves, likes, dislikes, goals, dreams, ambitions. He added something more bittersweet at the end. Why don't you start? It's your idea, suggested Samui, finding a seat on a nearby rock. The remaining group followed suit. The blonde youth frowned slightly, remembering that a certain pink-haired girl had given almost the same answer. Perhaps it wasn't the best idea. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. For the time being, I'm a mercenary ninja who was banished from my home village, Konoha no Sato. I like ramen and my precious people, he added, remembering Konan and Yugao, the mystery of Team Samui. I dislike traitors, snakes, and the 3 minutes I have to wait for the ramen to cook. My goal is to restore my clan and find a village where I can settle. My dream, he repeated. There was no longer pain in remembering his cries of wanting to be Hokage, only nostalgia. Is to bring peace to this world. The group seemed to have many questions. Omoi was the first to speak out, expressing his deep doubts. Were you banished? Why? Asked the dark-haired man with white hair. Previously, Naruto would have kept this information hidden, but at this point, he didn't care. My former teammate, Uchiha Sasuke, defected from Konoha to Otogekure. I stopped him and brought him back to the village, but I was forced to use the Nine-Tails chakra to do so. Kaikyubi, are you a Jinchuriki? Like Killer Bee-sama? Karui shouted. Killer Bee? Is that the Jinchuriki who can control his beast at will? The blonde deduced. He was our sensei, Samui stated. Well, I guess I've told you enough about myself. What do you have to say? Naruto asked this time. Unfortunately, Samui and Karui didn't get a chance to speak quickly enough, as Omoi had already raised his hand. My name is Omoi. Perhaps I should start with what I like? Or would it be better to talk about what I dislike? When talking about my dreams, I might need a foundation like my likes and dislikes, but do I have an ambition? I've never thought about it, but I also haven't thought about my dream. What if not having a dream is a bad thing? I should think of one. Samui managed to grab Karui before he could hit Omoi, as tempting as it was, but it didn't stop the white-haired boys babbling. Meanwhile, Naruto chuckled to himself, watching the scene, recalling some memories of his old team in Konoha. Memories that weren't bad. Maybe he hadn't been so unlucky that day at the Ninja Academy during the team selection. Took them a while, but they managed to complete the presentation, thanks to Omoi. Now it was time to follow the Raikage's orders, to assess Uzumaki Naruto's abilities. For Samui, as the team leader, this would be difficult. All she could do was evaluate the rumors and see how true they were. Quickly putting an end to Karui and Omoi's antics, she continued with the orders. Raikage-sama asked me to evaluate Uzumaki-san's abilities, Samui said sternly. Call me Naruto. I don't like formalities. The blonde confessed listlessly. All right, Naruto, she repeated, somewhat uncertainly. Omoi, Karui, you two will face Naruto in combat simultaneously. Any objections? The mercenary was undoubtedly surprised by Samui's commanding attitude, because her two teammates agreed without hesitation. Any objections, Naruto? He repeated, this time to himself. He looked stunned, but soon his expression transformed into a fox-like grin. Of course, Databeo, he shouted enthusiastically, jumping up from his rocky seat and standing in front of the redhead and the white-haired girl. For her part, Samui blushed slightly at the new member of her team's attitude, though she didn't know why. Naruto assumed a rather strange stance. His knees were slightly bent, which was normal. What was odd were his hand positions, which resembled those of a toad. Omoi and Karui exchanged perplexed glances at first, but then grinned. "Are you going to fight like a clown?" the redhead asked. The blonde man they were facing simply smiled in response, clearly unconcerned with their opinions. Annoyed by this behavior, Karui was the first to attack, attempting a punch, which Naruto evaded with a very strange movement. His hands moved like a toad's, easily slipping under the redhead's outstretched arm and knocking her off balance with a kind of swipe of his palm to the side of her chest, beneath her arm. Karui tried to regain her footing, shifting her weight onto her left foot, but it seemed the blonde man's style had already taken that into account, because he struck the side of her foot with his own, forcing her to fall without any support. "And how does this clown fight, Tabeo?" the blonde boy asked mockingly, causing the redhead to easily lose her temper. Omoi seized his opportunity and launched an attack with a kick to his rear, diverting the blonde's attention to the dark-haired man. From the ground, Karui tried to punch him, but Omoi used the back of his palm, deflecting the arm towards Omoi's body and striking him squarely in the abdomen. Omoi's now out-of-control kick was evaded by the blonde, who leaped using Karui's arm as a springboard, causing Omoi's failed kick to strike Karui herself. Naruto was now at a distance from the two opponents who had struck each other, resuming his strange stance. Samui was impressed. The fact that Karui and Omoi were so easily and completely outsmarted was something to applaud. She was also intrigued by the blonde boy's strange fighting style. His movements were an imitation of a supposedly fighting toad, which was quite amusing to watch. The pair stood up again, this time drawing their katanas, their specialty. Naruto was surprised by this. "You wanted to take it to the next level, now get ready," Karui retorted. The blonde man didn't seem to care. He simply reached for his belt, drawing one of his chakra blades and forming his wind-release saber. The group of opponents and Samui looked on in surprise. The blonde woman had deduced that she wouldn't be able to use kenjutsu with the empty sheath on her back. Apparently, she was wrong. "All right, what are you waiting for?" the blonde man asked defiantly, assuming his stance. He centered his wind-release sword diagonally across his upper body, a defensive position. Everything indicated that he planned to test his opponent's strength by giving them the first move. The pair attacked in unison, causing Naruto to evade Omoi's blade and successfully block Karui's. Seeing the failure, the white-haired boy plotted a new trajectory from the side, where he had forced Omoi to fall towards the blonde. To evade, the blonde stepped forward, pushing Karui and her sword to the ground. He then retreated using Omoi's own back as leverage and attempted an upward slash, which Omoi countered. This began a direct fight of attacks and blocks, but in a matter of seconds, the advantage was decided. Naruto forced Omoi back with his coordinated attacks, demonstrating a great capacity for combos. Karui stood up, moving to the position where the two young people were fighting a few steps away. She attempted to slash the blonde man's back, but he easily blocked it. The battle became a back-and-forth affair, with Naruto alternately blocking Karui and Omoi, thwarting each attempt to harm him. Despite the speed of the situation, he remained unaffected, demonstrating his great mastery of his swordsmanship. Finally, he blocked a horizontal slide from Karui with his sword downward, moving the same arm forward and forcing the redhead back. Omoi attempted a diagonal attack from the other side, which Naruto quickly blocked, simultaneously kicking Karui in the abdomen, sending her tumbling to the ground in a seated position. In a second move, Naruto allowed Omoi to gain the upper hand, guiding the edge of his katana to the side. With a three-quarter turn, the blonde man struck Omoi's back with the area near his hand of his arm, causing him to take several clumsy steps forward, stumbling over the knocked-down redhead. Samui, who had watched the entire spectacle, was even more impressed than before. Not only was his taijutsu strong, but his kenjutsu was powerful, with a style she had never seen before. "What style of kenjutsu did you use?" "I've never seen anything like it. It's the Uzumaki clan's swordsmanship," Of the 7 variations, its form V, Shuren/Gemso. Naruto informed them with great pride in the work and effort it had taken to develop that form, which had only been written on paper. A/N. For those who haven't visited the Star Wars wiki, this is the fighting style used by Anakin and Luke Skywalker. Initially, I wanted to give him the style used by Obi-Wan Kenobi, Form 3, Sorisu, but it doesn't suit Naruto's personality, since it focuses on patience and defense, waiting for the opponent to make a mistake. I immediately thought, that's not Naruto. The Shuren/Gemso form is 2 styles in one, implementing a simultaneous defense/attack, making it somewhat risky, but lethal. Samui remained surprised. After all, the Uzumaki swordsmen were great, but they were never contemporaries of the swordsmen of the mist. That would have been a battle worthy of admiration. They were marked as important alerts in the Kumogakure archives, forming part of its permanent history. It was magnificent that she herself was seeing one in person, perhaps the only one in the world. Is that all, Tabeo? He asked, amused, seeing the 2 young men down. Stunned and clumsily, they got back to their feet, clearly intending to face Naruto again. Chuckling, Naruto assumed another stance, this time in attack position, his sword held to the side, behind his waist, blade pointing downwards. This time, he initiated the battle, catching the 2 ninja off guard. It was inevitable that both would be on the defensive. It's useless. Both Karui and Omoi are Chunin ranked, and from what I can see, Naruto surpassed that level long ago. He's just toying with me, she thought as she observed her teammate's predicament. I guess we have to level him up. Samui drew a tanto from the back of her hip, held horizontally. A/N. The katana is the longest sword of this style, followed by the ninjato used by the ANBU, and the shortest of all, the tanto. The blonde positioned herself in Naruto's blind spot and proceeded to attack. Naruto sensed Samui's electric aura approaching from behind. She was fast, incredibly fast, which explained why the tanto was the perfect weapon for her. Being able to move like that would make it easy to slip through an opponent's defenses for a decisive attack. He also noticed the range of her abilities, which were far superior to those of the pair they were currently facing. For that reason, he had to be the team leader. If she joined the battle, it would be much more difficult. Just as Samui was about to attack, Naruto intentionally delayed Karui and Omoi. With that extra time, he managed to turn a quarter turn in Samui's direction, which initially surprised her. This surprise intensified when he only showed her his palm, revealing it was his non-sword hand. Naruto then attacked with an alpha wave. The electromagnetic beam propelled Samui away from her opponent at astonishing speed. Karui and Omoi had no time to react to such a technique, especially one performed without hand seals. Samui recovered mid-air, landing on a rock wall. She quickly resumed her attack, demonstrating her already impressive speed. He doesn't underestimate me. He has a good instinct for judging my abilities and keeps me at a distance so he can continue to delay the others, but you can't surprise me with the same thing now. The blonde smiled slightly. It seemed he was a worthy opponent. The rumors had been true. Sensing Samui's aura drawing near once more, Naruto, this time the blonde hair of the fight, brought her within range of his right eye. In the brief moments of freedom he found during the sword duel, he began unleashing a barrage of lightning flux. Small, high-speed packets of electrical energy with limited damaging potential could be launched in impressive succession, like throwing kunai simultaneously. Seeing the lightning bolts in her direction, Samui began evasive maneuvers. A jump to the left, to the right, a diagonal left jump forward. Only the mercenary, reading her aura, was surprised. Her speed is no joke. Damn. Her evasive ability is astonishing. Soon she was within Naruto's reach. Samui's tanto was approaching his guard zone, forcing him to react and change his strategy. Now! Samui shouted, launching a straight thrust followed by a downward horizontal attack with Karui and Omoi's katanas. The double katana attack was easily blocked by the familiar wind release sword. The team leader's thrust was surprisingly blocked by a second wind release sword with a downward slash. Naruto now possessed all 3 types of bladed weapons with his 2 swords. Wow! That's what I call teamwork. Tabeo! the blonde exclaimed in surprise. They hadn't even had any verbal dialogue. It was all based on prior teamwork. Did I exceed your expectations, Samui? The blonde asked curiously during the clash of swords. Well, I entered the fight for a reason. Karui and Omoi aren't enough to properly evaluate you. I'd like to do an evaluation myself. I don't want to present Reikage-sama with any errors. Her announcement sounded monotonous, but the blonde boy could see enthusiasm in the woman's eyes. She wanted this battle more than to write the report. This caused Naruto to chuckle again, earning a slightly irritated look from the team leader. What's so funny? She asked defiantly. Nothing. The mercenary quickly denied it. Another sword fight began, and to Team Samui's surprise, Naruto's dual-bladed fighting style caused their entire approach to change dramatically. Now he attacked both sides, taking turns in sync with simultaneous attacks and defenses. This successfully kept Karui and Omoi at bay, but Samui was a completely different situation. It was a fight between equals that quickly turned into a defensive battle for Naruto. Once the team adjusted to the blonde-haired man's style, the roles were reversed. I'm a little disappointed. Maybe you weren't so strong after all, Samui remarked to the blonde man as the three of them backed him away. You did change your kenjutsu style, though. What's it called? Is it a particular form? Naruto smiled amidst the clash of swords. It's not one of the 7 major sword forms. It's an isolated style, specialized for double-bladed combat, called Naiman/Jarkai. Naruto continued his defense as he responded. Unfortunately, I lost the advantage when you entered the battle, and I'm not very proficient in this style. Not applicable. Naiman/Jarkai is the style used by Asajj Ventress in Star Wars. Clone Wars? I say Clone Wars to differentiate it from the current Clone Wars series. It was the old animated series shown by Cartoon Network in the years leading up to the film Revenge of the Sith. She can be seen using it against Anakin Skywalker in a fierce battle. It's a style with advantages and disadvantages. The problem is that if the rhythm, so to speak, is lost, as is happening to Naruto now, it can be fatal since it has a disadvantage against more advanced swordsmen or in the case of multiple opponents. The blonde man quickly changed tactics, jumping back and sheathing his wind-release swords. What's wrong? Are you giving up? Karui asked, smiling. Of course not. I'm simply changing my strategy. And just like that, unpredictable as ever, Naruto took a gigantic leap, soaring high above their heads. What are you planning? Karui asked. Maybe he wants to run away, or maybe he'll try. He was interrupted by a momentary serious look from Samui. Don't get distracted and stay alert. Don't lose sight of your objective, I ordered sternly. While high above, Naruto soon began to lose speed. Seeing this, a shadow clone appeared beside him to provide support and continue his ascent, before dissipating. This action was repeated 3 times, until from the ground the blonde was only visible as a dot along the clouds. Here I come, he shouted, diving headfirst into the air. He quickly began to gain speed as he descended, and several sparks appeared around him. These increased as his speed increased. His posture shifted, ready for landing. Author's note: this is called Thunderfall, an ability I forgot to mention from Infamous. This technique doesn't use Naruto's own electrical energy. It charges ions around him, increasing their charge with the speed of his fall, creating a gigantic shockwave upon impact with the ground. Obviously, the greater the fall, the stronger the shockwave becomes. It was like a sky-to-ground missile. It created a powerful electrical wave that practically shook the ground to its foundations. Karui was caught within the wave's range, taken by surprise, and thrown against a rock, losing consciousness on impact. Omoi narrowly escaped amidst the chaos, but this chaos was the blonde's intention from the start. Naruto, wasting no time, formed his most frequently used seal, murmuring a few words. Lightning release, shadow clone technique. A/N. I don't think I need to explain. It's a matter of Naruto implementing lightning release chakra into his shadow clone technique. In the series, it was used by Kakashi with slight differences. When it dissipates, it can paralyze or stun opponents if they are nearby. The shadow clone quickly transformed into a giant shuriken. The blonde boy took it in his hands and threw it at Omoi, performing the same gesture with other hand seals. Shadow Clone Shuriken Technique. Soon there were 10 giant shuriken, all aimed at Omoi. He clumsily managed to dodge them from left to right, front to back. He took one last leap backward, evading the final one, but all the giant shuriken now on the ground beneath Omoi dissipated, creating an electrical storm in which the white-haired boy was partially caught, slightly stunned. Just enough for Naruto to leap up to him. Rasengan. Controlling its power, he knocked his opponent unconscious against a rock. 2 out, 1 remains, she said, looking at the only remaining member of Team Samui, their own leader. She had easily evaded Naruto's attempt at chaos, but she saw that it was enough to take the rest of her team out of commission. For now, that impression was overshadowed by a discovery greater than anything she had seen before. Rasengan? The original jutsu of the 4th Hokage? She asked incredulously. Then everything made sense. Kyubi Jinchuriki, banished from Konoha, blonde hair, blue eyes, including the reason the Raikage had taken an interest. You're the son of the Kiroi Senko. Well, I didn't expect that to be a secret. I even imagined that the Raikage had informed you. Naruto sighed. If he had understood Konohamaru before, now it was even more so, trapped in his father's shadow. Naruto drew another chakra blade, forming the wind release sword once more. Shall we continue? He asked. Samui, setting aside her incredible discovery, drew her tanto again, assuming an attack stance. They resumed their fight from where they had left off. Both battled with great skill and dexterity in the clash of blades, but Samui gained the upper hand, quickly cornering Naruto. Samui was faster and more effective in her attacks, clearly indicating she had been holding back from the start, demonstrating that her skill with the tanto was not to be underestimated. Then I understand. The reason you and your team only use kenjutsu. You're a stealth and infiltration team. Jutsu would only draw attention to yourselves. The blonde deduced, eliciting an affirmative response from his opponent. You're practically ANBU without masks. That's right, it seems you're also good at strategy, but I expected more from your kenjutsu. Is this all Uzumaki swordsmanship can do? It was strange for her. She would never take a training or evaluation fight this far. She always adhered to protocol. But for some reason, this young man made her continue the fight, as if he were stirring her warrior blood, something that hadn't happened since her academy days. That enthusiasm for being a kunoichi had faded with time. You were holding back from the start. You're really just playing around, aren't you? Naruto asked, but she didn't answer, agreeing with him with her eyes. I suppose you want to give the Raikage a good report, so I'll give you everything I know. With a sigh, the blonde boy concentrated on his free hand. The tips of his fingers began to glow an intense white. Samui could see 5 different kanji characters on each finger, but from a distance, she couldn't make them out. Uzumaki Fuin. Gyaku Kuchios no Jutsu. /N. The author really went overboard in this chapter, didn't he? Anyway, Uzumaki sealing art, reverse summoning Naruto while on Mount Myobokuzen, studied the knowledge of Uzumaki seals, at the same time studying the toad summoning scroll, managing to create a way of summoning contrary to the usual one with blood. But this is only usable on things other than toads, but only from Mount Myobokuzen itself. Naruto struck the ground with his fingers, creating an explosion of smoke. Samui didn't expect to see what was coming from there. Within the smoke was another Naruto in the lotus position, meditating, completely absorbed by the outside world. What was curious to his opponent were his red eyelids. What appeared to be a shadow clone was quickly dissolved by the original, gaining the same characteristic as the shadow clone. Opening his eyes, he revealed his toad-like eyes. Naruto laughed at Samui's stunned expression. This is what's called sage mode, the art of senjutsu. Samui was speechless, staring in surprise at the radical change in the blonde man. Not just his eyes, but his chakra as well. She could feel it emanating from him without any hint of malice. It was calm and warm, even for his colossal size. His wind-release chakra sword had also changed. Instead of being the light blue chakra usually is, it was white. Shaking her head at the satisfied expression on her opponent's face, She resumed her stance with her tanto. The sage's fencing stance changed. The saber rose above his abdomen, in front of his chest, tilted slightly diagonally forward. "Are you changing your style again?" Samui asked curiously. "You wanted a full report, right?" asked the blonde opponent. "In sage mode, I change my style for convenience. I use form 4, Ataru, you'll soon find out why," he said slyly. N/a yes, it's me again. Form 4. Ataru is a Jedi swordsmanship style that is exhausting for those who are not strong in the Force. It requires exaggerated movements, creating extraordinary agility by continuously using the Force, which here is replaced by natural energy. You'll easily understand it with the following. It's the style used by Yoda. For more information, see the fight between Palpatine versus Yoda or Dooku versus Yoda. Naruto began the battle with a very high spiral jump. Making rapid spins, he landed in front of Samui, beginning a high-speed duel. Samui barely managed to parry the sword strikes and counterattack, only for the blonde to leap again and attack from a different angle. She was practically dizzy from all the movement. Things only got worse as she quickly became exhausted against such power. His attacks were strong and difficult to block with her tanto. To finish her off, Naruto unleashed a single voltaic wave attack, sending Samui crashing into the rocks. It wasn't enough to knock her unconscious, but it was enough to make her acknowledge her defeat. "I surrender," Samui said, somewhat resentful of this defeat. The blonde man, for his part, smiled slightly, letting out a sigh. His eyes returned to normal as his saber reverted to its standard blue. He quickly sheathed it in his belt and approached the defeated and exhausted Samui. Politely, he extended his hand. The team leader seemed stunned by such a display, but once she recognized his power, she smiled, accepting the mercenary's help. "Thank you," she said calmly. "It's been a while since I've had a battle like this," Naruto replied. "I agree, although I don't understand your intention in learning so many fencing styles. Not specializing will make you weak," the blonde confessed. "While that's true, I need to learn them all in order to master the final style. Form 7, Geo/Wattpad, is a combination of all the forms, but it takes years to develop," the blonde man explained. N/a, this is the last time I interfere. This is Mace Windu's style. The style itself relies heavily on emotions, possibly making it the most suitable for Naruto, although it's counterproductive for Jedi since the style, being so emotional, can lead you to the dark side. Karui and Omoi, who had woken up during the final part of the fight, took the opportunity to approach. "So you were practically toying with us," Karui stated, somewhat irritated. The blonde man shifted nervously. From past experience, he knew better than to bother women, so he wisely chose to remain silent. "I suppose we should give the report to the Raikage now, or maybe we'll go look for Naruto's apartment, or some of us could go to Naruto's apartment and others to the Raikage's. Although a better idea would be for one of us to go to." It was once untold on the day that Karui hit Omoi on the head, to Naruto's amusement and Samui's irritation. Team Samui, along with their newest member, arrived at the latter's apartment. Like everything in Kumogakure, it was built into the rocks, perched comfortably high up, much to Naruto's liking. The view, while not comparable to the Raikage's, was impressive, though it didn't seem all that remarkable to Team Samui. Of course, they all lived under the same panoramic views, which made the new member a little envious. The apartment was spacious, much larger than the one he had in Konoha, from Naruto's perspective. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a living room, a dining room, a kitchen, and a balcony. It was everything he needed and more, especially since it was something he hadn't initially intended to get. Adding to his good fortune, the apartment was fully furnished. A dining table, a sofa set by the living room window with a coffee table, and a kitchen with all the necessary appliances, some of which he'd never seen before. The bedrooms were also furnished with a large bed in the main bedroom, while the second bedroom was already set up as a small study, including a small bed and nightstands with lamps. Everything was perfect. Of course, the blonde boy had tears in his eyes when he saw him, luxuries he'd never had in his life, and now they were his. Samui, Karui, and Omoi looked at him in surprise, at least Samui did initially, But then she thought about her life as a Jinchuriki. Their pasts hadn't been easy. Uchiha had been spared thanks to Killer Bee for being a Jinchuriki and the Raikage's brother, but not everyone was so lucky. Naruto was one of the unlucky ones. Reason enough to be banished from his village. Alright, we'll begin missions regularly starting tomorrow. You must report to Training Ground 7. Naruto nodded, clearly understanding Samui's order. He simultaneously felt a wave of nostalgia for his former life in Konoha. This wouldn't be so bad after all. The missions proceeded normally after that, causing the new team member and the veterans to quickly develop a close bond, almost like a friendship. Or at least some faster than others. Omoi and Karui had quickly fallen for the blonde's charm. Perhaps he was irritating at first, but once you got to know him, you found it somewhat amusing, maybe because of the naturally calm aura he exuded. Soon, this part of the team, Karui, Omoi, and Naruto, were frequently seen off mission. Initially, Naruto had invited them to his beloved ramen shop, which was still visiting the village. Ayam welcomed them warmly, surprised that this long-lost friend from her village had been fortunate enough to find new friends in these distant lands. At the same time, Naruto cursed himself, because the cook quickly began telling comical stories from Naruto's past, with his most frequent topic being mischief, greatly entertaining the pair from Kumogakure. Samui was a different story. For some reason, she kept her distance off missions, not wanting to completely let her guard down around the blonde man. She didn't want to be dependent on him on missions for fear of being unreliable, for the same reason she didn't want to get close to him off missions. She couldn't earn his trust. She was a mercenary, not a loyal member of this village. It was her duty as a kunoichi of this village to protect him from any danger. Or at least that's what I tried to do until a certain mission in particular, where I would discover not only the blonde's true intentions, but also how far Naruto's loyalty to his teammates and comrades could go in order to maintain their safety. The Raikage had sent them on a mercenary hunting mission. It was supposed to be just a couple of mercenaries causing trouble in a nearby village. But it turned out that wasn't the case at all. It wasn't just a couple of mercenaries. It was an entire mercenary squad. They were vastly outnumbered. Team Samui was ambushed, finding the entire village they were supposed to protect destroyed by the rogue ninja. Samui and Omoi themselves were injured while cornered against a massive cliff. Karui held Omoi up while Samui braced herself against a nearby rock. Naruto was in the best condition of all, holding the front line and protecting his wounded comrades. The fight dragged on as the weather worsened. The already present clouds turned a deep black, thundering as the rain poured down. But the blonde boy stood firm, this time using his lightning blades, piercing the armor and weapons of the numerous enemies. But it was useless. There were simply too many. The rain began to fall. Naruto, take Karui back to the village. Do this as an order from your commanding ninja. Samui ordered sternly. Naruto shook his head. A ninja who breaks the rules is scum, but a ninja who abandons his friends is worse than scum, he shouted angrily at Samui's request, who looked at him in surprise at his response. I'll finish these clowns off with one shot. Without thinking twice, he focused on the clouds. He could feel the electrical charge coursing through them every second. Letting out a sigh, he focused on the sky. A clap of thunder struck the blonde ninja's location, much to the horror of his team. When the flash of thunder disappeared, the blonde man remained, surrounded by small, constant electrical sparks all around his body. Concentrating all his power, he let out a shout, gesturing forward with his hands. Soon, from the sky, from the clouds themselves, a dozen thunderclaps began to crash down upon the numerous mercenaries. It was a true electrical storm, controlled by the blonde man, who put all his effort into doing so. Screams echoed from within, as no one could see through the glare of the multiple lightning bolts. When the artificial storm created by Naruto subsided, only bodies remained, charred by the pure electricity, some unrecognizable. The mercenaries were completely and utterly erased from existence, not a single one left alive. The rest watched in disbelief at the destructive power of such a terrible attack. It was, to find no better words to describe it, a massacre, complete and utter. Is everyone all right? Naruto asked between sighs. Receiving no response, he slowly stood up to face his teammates, who remained silent, having witnessed the destructive power of his technique. Step by step, he approached their leader. "Is everyone all right?" he repeated, a little less breathless, but his legs trembled with exhaustion. Karui and Omoi nodded slightly, but then he looked at Samui, who was staring at him quietly. "Samui, are you all right?" Following the lead of her allied subordinates, she nodded slightly. Naruto offered her his hand, helping her up, but she stumbled, her legs injured. With a swift movement, Naruto caught her in his arms. "What are you doing? You're lucky to even be standing," she complained at the other blonde's oblivious behavior. "For my precious people, my friends and comrades, I will always have the strength to help you," Naruto proclaimed with his usual confidence. Samui blushed incredibly at that comment, so much so that even Karui, strangely enough, noticed. The blonde had different thoughts. "Do you have a fever? Perhaps the enemy used poison. We need to get back to the village quickly," he deduced, alert and ready. The others nodded, and with Karui carrying Omoi, they headed back to the village. Samui was lost in thought. She could recall the first handshake she'd given the blonde man in the Raikage's office. That strange warmth was what she felt now, coursing through her body. She was a kunoichi through and through, never one to accept being treated this way, but she couldn't help but be instantly captivated by the comforting warmth emanating from the blonde man. A warmth that bestowed immeasurable and unparalleled security. She couldn't fight this warmth for long, and within minutes she fell asleep with a small smile on her face. Days had passed since that incident, and Samui was still processing her reactions and feelings. Now they were gathered before the Raikage at Naruto's own request. Of course, the village leader awaited the blonde boy's explanation, which, due to Naruto's impatient nature, didn't take long. "I received an urgent message. I've come here to announce my temporary departure from the village," Naruto announced in accordance with the agreement previously made with the village leader, surprising his own teammates. "What is the reason for this?" asked Orochimaru. The blonde man replied directly. "It seems he's searching for his next host." "Next body?" the Raikage insisted doubtfully. "Orochimaru has achieved a jutsu that grants him immortality. To do so, he must continually change bodies." The group present, and even the Raikage himself, watched in horror, unaware of all this information. "As a duty to the third Hokage, I must confront him. He is a threat, not only to Konoha, but to the entire world," he replied coldly. His ambitions would affect any village, including this one. A nodded in understanding. "Understood, you can leave. Just show your passport when you leave the village and when you return. They should let you in. Do you know where Orochimaru is?" he added, now a little more curious about Orochimaru's actions. "He's going to Iwakagure. His target is the Tsuchikige's granddaughter, Kuratsuchi," he answered directly. This confirmed the belief that Orochimaru was obviously after big and important targets. The Raikage was lucky he hadn't set his sights on someone from his village. Team Samui assembled at the village gates. Now, in full view of the group, Naruto had become an official part of the team, even though he didn't wear a Kumogakure headband. The village had even heard of his heroic deed in saving the team from the mercenaries, earning him the respect of many. "Don't lose to that snake. Remember you're welcome in Kumogakure now," Karui stated confidently. Despite her tough and strong demeanor, she teared up during the farewell, which made Naruto chuckle. "Don't worry, I'll be back. I didn't think the village would be so nice," Naruto confirmed. "I hope you don't take long. Although it could take quite a while, maybe a few weeks or months, it's even possible it could be years, but in that case, the passport might not be valid and he won't be able to enter. Maybe they'll replace the Raikage next week and won't allow Naruto access to the village. Or maybe Orochimaru will take over Naruto's body and it won't be Naruto who returns, but Orochimaru in Naruto's body, and he'll try to attack the Raikage, taking advantage of the..." In the blink of an eye, Omoi was on the ground, courtesy of a punch from Karui. "Yeah. I'll remember your warnings. I'll definitely miss your conclusions," Naruto added playfully. "Naruto," Samui called out to him, calling his name. The mercenary looked at his team leader, waiting. "Take care and don't let your guard down," she said sternly, to which Naruto nodded. Despite this, Samui maintained a subtle blush on her cheeks. "I hope you come back soon. You've created a new place on the team that can't be filled by anyone else." "Of course, Tabeo," the blonde boy affirmed confidently, adding his involuntary catchphrase. He quickly turned around and walked away from the village. A short distance away, he turned slightly and waved goodbye to Team Samui one last time. Samui watched him leave, finally understanding something the moment Naruto disappeared from sight. A new resolution formed in her mind, one she would never regret. "I'll ask him out on a date when I get back." 10. A First Look. Exile Chapter 10. A First Look. The three bodies collapsed onto the soft bed, sweating profusely, their skin rapidly cooling. Their heart rates and breathing remained rapid. They quickly sought the warmth of the sheets and blankets on the floor, which served as a companion to the clothes they had lost on the way to this room. In just a few seconds, the three bodies had managed to conserve their body heat in the cold room. It had been cold from the start, but because of their actions, they hadn't needed to seek warmth until their activities ceased. Now in the tranquil room, which just moments before had been anything but, the three settled comfortably. The male figure took his place in the center of the bed, flanked on either side by a female figure. Their breathing became more regular as weariness and sleep approached. Lust subsided in the kisses that soothed their passion, offering no indication that this kind of affection would soon end. Their movements, once rough and hungry, became slow and gentle, revealing the honest feelings and intentions of the three. "And this was the last thing I expected tonight," the only man in the room thought to himself, abandoning the kisses after sensing his companion's weariness. One with purple hair and the other with blue. But they didn't stop, or at least showed no sign of wanting to, continuing their kisses on his chest, neck, jaw, cheeks, ears, nose, forehead, and most importantly, his mouth. Soon he surrendered to their advances, responding with pleasure, seeking to devour their parted lips while his gaze lingered on their pleading brown and amber eyes. After a few minutes, the women stopped, feeling they could no longer hold back their exhaustion. The man understood, seeking to draw closer to them so they could begin their well-deserved rest. He put his arms around each of them, and with the same arm he took their hands. The two women smiled at this gesture, letting him put his arm around them and intertwine their fingers. "It was an incredible surprise, Naruto-kun." The blue-haired girl began the conversation. "Although it's a shame you're only passing through," the purple-haired girl finished. "If it were up to me, I'd stay by your side forever, Yuchan, Ko-chan," the blonde boy told them. It was true, even though he didn't regret the weeks he'd spent in Kumogakure befriending Team Samui, but nothing could compare to being with them. "I'd like to spend every day knowing that the first and last thing I see before falling asleep is you." They simply responded by snuggling tenderly against his neck. Minutes passed as they slowly drifted off to sleep. Naruto watched intently as the first eyes to close were the brown ones, followed by the amber ones. The blonde tried in vain to resist sleep so he could spend more time with them, even if only while they slept. He admired their respective beauties. He listened to their soft breaths, moans, and whimpers. He felt the gentle touch of their skin against his, admiring the differences in skin tones. He stroked their long and short hair. Noticing his futile battle against sleep, he gave each of them one last tender kiss on their foreheads before closing his eyes until the next day. He needed to rest well because the following day he would have a confrontation from which no ninja would emerge alive. Unlike the Land of Lightning, which possessed a distinctive, lighter-colored rock, the Land of Earth had a darker, somewhat more somber hue, softened at that moment by the coppery color the rocks acquired from the setting sun. Naruto witnessed this as he moved at great speed among the towering cliffs and mountains of this land. He found himself near the southern border that faced the Land of Rocks. Everything indicated that Orochimaru had managed to deceive and isolate the Tsuchikige's granddaughter far from the safe walls of the village with a deceptive mission. They were now on a rare plain, a stark contrast to the country's rocky geography. Using his electric sense, he detected two auras nearby. There was nowhere to hide on this vast, flat terrain, so he spotted his target from afar. One stood tall while the other knelt before it. The young woman was breathing heavily, on her knees, unable to support her own weight. Exhausted, she glared with hatred at the mocking smile of the man before her. She had tried everything, but this man was far too skilled for her. His taijutsu techniques, combined with medical techniques, made him a dangerous opponent who quickly and systematically incapacitated her. Now, thanks to this, she couldn't even perform a simple kawarimi. Her limbs were paralyzed, and her chakra was nullified by precise taijutsu strikes. You're strong. I understand why Orochimaru-sama desires your body. That Yotan element is very rare. The man stated maliciously. Just surrender, Kuratsuchi. Damn Four Eyes. She growled furiously, feeling the terrible helplessness of not being able to defend herself. She was an elite jounin of her village, the granddaughter of the Tsuchikage. She couldn't be defeated in such a simple and shameful way. It will only hurt for a second. Orochimaru-sama needs your body intact and alive to perform his jutsu. Orochimaru was about to take a step, intending a precise attack that would render his victim unconscious. But he couldn't, as a kind of electrical force struck him like a wall, forcibly pushing him away from Kuratsuchi. The man reacted by landing a few feet back, raising his head toward his victim. Now another human figure stood between them. Well, Four Eyes, it's been a while. The voice of the participant announced the contest. It took her a moment to recognize him. His attire and older age made it difficult, but his blue eyes, blonde hair, and unmistakable sideburns gave away the stranger. Uzumaki Naruto. I should say Namikaze Naruto. At that surname, Kuratsuchi raised her head to the person who had his back to her. I'm surprised to see you around here. Likewise, Kabuto. I thought Orochimaru at least had the decency to seek out his own victims. Now I see that this means only one thing. His deterioration without a new body is greater than expected. The blonde concluded. Well, maybe you've lost some of your idiocy with age, but all that's put to the test when I see you here alone. The medical ninja replied with a confident smile. You'll never beat me, you're just a loser. Proud conclusion. Well, that makes it worse, right? The blonde replied, unfazed by the words of Orochimaru's right-hand man. What do you mean? He said, confused. Being defeated by a real loser must hurt. Naruto replied, managing to change Kabuto's mind game, as evidenced by a frown and a forced smile from him. You sure know how to get under someone's skin. He grunted, maintaining his forced smile as he adjusted his glasses. I see that all you've done is change your appearance. The rest remains the same. An impetuous, restless, and hyperactive knucklehead ninja. Kabuto assumed his taijutsu stance, his hands glowing from his chakra scalpel technique. Naruto mimicked him, assuming his stance from his Kawazu Kumite. A/N, Toad Kata. And proud of it, Tabeo. Naruto began with a swift advance toward his bespectacled target. This initiated a taijutsu battle. Kabuto attempted to land blows on specific points, but the blonde managed to evade and redirect each strike with his unique style. Naruto's style relied on deflecting blows by using his limbs, especially the backs of his palms, to break the enemy's guard and then attack without hindrance. In the same way that he deflected blows, he created distractions using his palms, diverting the opponent's attention to the strange gestures he made. Kabuto was forced to retreat. Initially, he didn't take him seriously, but as the battle progressed, he noticed how advanced Namikaze's taijutsu was, despite being so unconventional and unorthodox. Although, admiring it from that perspective, it suited the blonde man. Soon, the technique used was revealed. Surprised by its execution, the medical ninja leaped back from his opponent. You haven't wasted your time these past few years, Namikaze, Kabuto praised. I guess you're not a loser. First of all, I'm Uzumaki. It's the name I was given at birth. And changing your mind so quickly? Naruto asked defiantly. Orochimaru's assistant adjusted his glasses, a calm smile playing on his lips. As a doctor, I must carefully analyze situations with sound judgment. Overestimating one's abilities, especially in my field, can lead to negligence in the harm a patient might sustain from an illness. So, am I a disease? Naruto asked, amused by that analogy. I suppose you are in some way, I concluded, equally amused. The evaluation process is over, Naruto-kun. It's time to end this. I don't want to keep Orochimaru-sama waiting. With a sardonic laugh, Kabuto initiated the attack this time. The attack/block began the same as before. Kabuto attempted to attack while Naruto blocked, gradually creating an opening. But soon Kabuto's speed increased, as did his already precise strikes. Naruto managed to block several, but it all ended with a fatal mistake. Kabuto, using his speed to his advantage, delivered a direct hit with his medical technique to the blonde's heart. This proves you're not on my level, he continued in his smug tone. Seeing the horror on the blonde's face, Kabuto was surprised when the horror turned into a smile. Faggot. From behind, the medical ninja was attacked with a leg strike, instantly throwing him off balance. Demonstrating his excellent center of gravity, he used his hands to recover from the blow and counterattacked with a Naruto kick. This block, executed with his signature style, was already surprising the medic's responsiveness in difficult situations. Deciding not to waste any time, Naruto attempted a punch, but in a display of pure balance, Kabuto used the blonde ninja's arm to pull himself to his feet. With his chakra scalpels, he attempted to attack the blonde man internally, hoping to disable one of his arms, a valuable advantage. However, the medic hadn't anticipated that the supposed Naruto would vanish in another puff of smoke. Without warning, Kabuto was struck directly by a powerful right hook from his opponent, instantly knocking him down and sending him flying several meters back. As he crawled on the ground, Kabuto used his right palm to push off the ground and land back on his feet, resuming his fighting stance. You continue to surprise me, Naruto-kun. Not only have you evolved your taijutsu style into something quite strange, but you've also enhanced your personality with your shadow clones. You possess one at a level above normal, though it doesn't quite reach my level. I also found your weakness once. Remember? This time, Tsunade won't be able to save you. Orochimaru's right-hand man explained in great detail. Maybe, but you still haven't managed to hit me, and I know you can regenerate as long as you have chakra. Who has an unlimited source of chakra in their stomach? Last time I checked, it was me. Believe it, the blonde replied to the threat. Last time I defeated you with a Rasengan, and I think you still managed to partially recover from the damage. In that case, I have a special gift for you. The blonde's expression turned serious. One last thing, I'll most likely escape after this, so I'll say it now. Kabuto raises an eyebrow in amusement. Me? Escape? Fine. That's your habit when you're about to lose. Naruto replied dismissively, prompting a mental groan from the doctor. Tell Orochimaru that the next time you see him, I'll finish Hokage Jiji's job, and his arms will be the last thing on his mind. Without giving Kabuto time to process his words, Naruto lunged at him one last time, restarting the hand-to-hand combat. Kabuto initiated the attack with a right hook from his chakra scalpel, which Naruto easily deflected upwards with the back of his right palm. Frustrated, the medic repeated the move with his left hand, but this time Naruto grabbed his wrist with his right. Try to regenerate from this. Wind release. Rasengan. The medic watched with fascination and horror as the white sphere formed in the blonde's right hand in a fraction of a second, which was then abruptly slammed into his abdomen, sending him flying meters backward in a white vortex like a firecracker. Naruto watched as the sphere hurtled away at high speed, certain that Kabuto wouldn't escape unscathed. By adding the wind release element to his Rasengan, he changed the type of damage it inflicted, or rather specialized it, causing damage at a cellular level, not only destroying cells but also severing chakra pathways. In short, Kabuto wouldn't be able to regenerate his cells conventionally. It wasn't as powerful as the Rasen Shuriken, but it was powerful enough to prevent him from inflicting damage on himself through counterattacks. That was the reason he wanted to throw the Rasen Shuriken. Turning around, he noticed the reason for her presence. She was staring at the ground, her black hair obscuring her face, which he hadn't seen until then because of the battle. Concerned about her condition, the blonde man knelt before her to get a closer look. The girl, for her part, didn't know what she was thinking as she watched the fight. While a large part of her was happy not to have to be that man's experiment, the other part, her pride as a kunoichi of a Wagakure, wouldn't let her rest. The worst part at that moment wasn't the defeat, nor that she had been saved. It was the fact that she owed her life to a Namikaze, that man who had been the scourge of Iwagakure during the Third Shinobi World War. While resentment toward that man still simmered in her village, he was also respected for his great strength. Soon, the young woman, lost in thought, noticed someone standing before her. Slowly, she raised her face, bracing herself for whatever lay ahead. Nothing could have prepared her for the sapphire eyes the boy wore. They shone brightly, like two gleaming jewels. Her heart felt as if it would leap from her chest, pounding at the pure concern reflected in them. She completely forgot her wounded kunoichi pride, the boy's lineage, or her recent defeat at the hands of a medic. All that mattered were those eyes. Naruto watched as the girl raised her head to meet his eyes. They were like two gleaming pearls, brimming with intelligence and cunning, strength and black pride. He seemed mesmerized by those eyes, completely and utterly captivated. He felt his heart race as he gazed at them, unconsciously memorizing them. They possessed such a unique brilliance that a man would be mad not to be captivated by such gems. Shaking his thoughts and turning his head, he spoke seriously. Did you feel all right? He stammered. Why on earth did I sound like Hinata? He wondered, terrified by the situation. He didn't want to make a bad impression. Ha! The young woman tilted her head, confused by the situation, her own mind betraying her. She quickly regained her composure, embarrassed by a slight blush. Yes, I'm fine. Anyway, what are you doing here? She asked, almost shouting. It seemed she wasn't quite in control of her emotions at that moment. Why did he have to look at her like that? The blonde boy seemed offended by that response. Your ungrateful ass was saved from Orochimaru, he replied in the same tone. Which reminds me. Naruto concentrated at least half of his remaining chakra. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A shadow clone appeared next to the blonde boy. Locate Kabuto and follow him to his base. We must find that snake's hideout, he ordered sternly. Yes, boss. Without another word, the clone jumped in the direction Kabuto had gone. Is that guy still alive? Kuratsuchi asked, surprised. She'd experienced so many shocks, had so many questions, and needed to sort through so many thoughts that she decided to focus on the most pressing issue, the attempted kidnapping. What did he mean by body for Orochimaru? Was the first thing that came to mind. You've heard of Orochimaru, haven't you? The blonde man asked, probably. Just like her, he was sorting through his thoughts, which had become quite chaotic. Of course, he's listed in every bingo book as an S-rank ninja, being one of the Sannin who deserted Konoha. The young woman explained, recalling everything she had read about that man. What does that have to do with anything? What did that guy want with me? She continued questioning, but let out a groan. Come on. I'll take you to your village. I'll tell you everything on the way. Naruto replied, offering his back and remaining crouched down, inviting her to climb onto his back. What? Why are you helping me? Your father. She was brutally interrupted by Naruto. My father was in a war just like your people. They did what they had to do. The war is over, end of story. The blonde man emphasized sternly. Besides, my father is my father and I am me. We are completely different people. Now get in. We're a day's journey from your house, and I don't know what kind of injuries that Four Eyes could have inflicted on you. The dark-haired woman seemed to tense up at that. But don't worry, it can't be anything fatal. You're no use to Orochimaru dead. But it doesn't make sense. Why are you helping me? I insist confidently. Unlike most ninja these days, I have a conscience. If I left someone injured and incapacitated behind, it would haunt me for the rest of my life. She still saw a lot of doubt on her face. She was stubborn. If it makes you feel better, I need to see Tsuchikage, so we're headed in the same direction. She insisted without further ado. With a resigned sigh, she climbed onto the blonde man's back. Has anyone ever told you you're stubborn? She asked, a little annoyed. I could say the same about you, he replied, amused. Naruto, feeling a frown creeping across his face, started walking towards Iwagakure. After a few minutes of ignoring her, he resumed talking, bringing up their previous topic again, keeping the journey light and engaging. Here we are, Iwagakure. Kuratsuchi's conclusion. Wow, it's kind of creepy, the blonde man announced, somewhat intimidated by the appearance of the ninja village. Are you kidding? It's the best thing ever. The girl stated confidently. You can put me down now, are you sure? Yesterday you could barely walk and… Naruto was interrupted by her. I can walk, and that's what we're going to do now, she growled stubbornly. Fine, fine. I'll let you walk, Naruto grumbled. Once on the ground, he took a confident step, but as soon as he did, he stumbled and would have fallen if not for Naruto catching him. Kuratsuchi was about to protest, but upon meeting those eyes so close, she couldn't help but forget any protest, blushing in embarrassment. Naruto was in a similar state upon seeing those dark eyes, but upon realizing where they were, he quickly regained his composure. I warned you it was dangerous, Tebeo, the blonde grumbled again. I can walk by myself, he exclaimed, trying to hide the blush on his face with that shout. Now standing upright, he began his walk through the gates. Soon, the two Chunin on duty appeared, ready for action. The pair of ninjas eyed Naruto suspiciously, but before a scene could erupt, Kuratsuchi intervened, explaining the deception surrounding their mission and the reason for their meeting. Promising to escort him to the Tsuchikige's office, the black-haired girl accompanied Naruto to his grandfather's. Initially, the blonde-haired boy tried to dissuade her from going to the hospital to monitor his injuries, but she stubbornly insisted on being with him when he went to see his grandfather. Upon entering the office, I noticed the old man in the Tsuchikage position, to be precise, the third Tsuchikage, Inoki, also known as Ryotenbin no Inoki. A/N. Inoki of the two scales. Jiraiya had told Naruto about this man in the past, although it was actually a general lesson about the current ninja world, recounting the Kage of each village, including in the report, much to his surprise, Gaara of Sabaka no Gaara, the fifth Kazekage. The old man didn't take his eyes off her from the moment she entered his office accompanied by Kuratsuchi. Tsuchikage-sama. The mission turned out to be a deception. Everything indicated that despite being his granddaughter, in serious situations she behaved as required. The old man raised an eyebrow. Deception? What do you mean by that? It would be better if I told you, Tsuchikage-sama. Naruto interrupted. And who are you? For some reason you seem familiar, he said suspiciously. Uzumaki Naruto. I was the one who uncovered the scheme to kidnap your granddaughter. He answered firmly and without hesitation. After all, showing weakness before a Kage was not allowed. It had been difficult for him to do so before the Raikage, but he would not be intimidated by either him or the Raikage. The old man seemed expectant for him to continue. So far, he hadn't told him anything he hadn't already been informed of except his name. I am Jiraiya Gama Senin's disciple. Through his spy network, I actively track Orochimaru's movements, and that's how I discovered that your granddaughter was the next target. The room erupted in surprise when he revealed he was Jiraiya's apprentice, something even Kuratsuchi hadn't noticed during his earlier explanation. Next target for what? He asked, curious and surprised that one of the legendary Sannin was interested in his granddaughter and that the other's apprentice was in his office. I understand your granddaughter possesses a rare Kekii Genkai, Earth release. This has caught Orochimaru's attention as a potential target for his next immortality jutsu body. Now it was the Tsuchikage's turn to be surprised. While I don't wish for anyone to be used in such a way, I also have a personal intention of stopping Orochimaru as a threat to the ninja nations. Preventing him from having a strong body makes my task easier. I understand, but right now I'm more curious about the real reason you're in my office. Inoki questioned the blonde man's actions, causing Kuratsuchi to look at Naruto with noticeable curiosity. You didn't have to come to inform me in person. Even Kuratsuchi would have sufficed. True. I have a proposition for you, the blonde man said simply, eliciting a smile from the old man. I'd like to work as a mercenary ninja for this town. I'd be happy with regular and occasional missions to gain experience. It's difficult to find missions where one can gain experience in small towns. In return for this favor, I would give you quite a bit of important information, even a mystery that I believe you're unaware of until now. What could that mystery be? The old man had to admit the boy knew how to make a deal. The fate of their Biju and those responsible for the extraction of the Jinchuriki from this village. He answered, disgusted at the word Jinchuriki. Do you know who they were? How do I know you're not deceiving me? He shouted, agitated. The blond man responded by reaching for the hem of his jacket and abruptly lifting it, revealing his abdomen. Kuratsuchi blushed slightly at the sight of the blond man's subtly defined pectoral muscles, but that embarrassment quickly vanished when she saw something appear there. A seal. Because those who are hunting the Jinchuriki, I am hunting, he replied sternly. Well, I can see you'd be honest, but even if you told me, I might not finalize the deal and could simply throw you out of my village. The old man replied shrewdly. Now he draws attention to his future response. I can live with the risk and the consequences, Naruto replied dismissively. Besides, you'd pay me the same as a regular ninja from your village, and I doubt you want to risk your own ninjas when you can use mercenary labor. It's not the first time you've done this, and that's why you lost your Jinchuriki. After all, you help fund the organization. Huh? Don't tell me that. Inoki opened his eyes in surprise at that revelation. Akatsuki, Naruto emphasized, offering the old man something real to ponder. I assume that despite hiring them, you didn't ask for names. I have every name and skill they possess in that organization, including the name of their leader, and I think you'll be interested. Uchiha Madara. Madara. He repeated as if in a trance, but soon recovered. Yes, it was probably him. This time it was Naruto who raised an eyebrow. That Tsuchikage was implying that he knew more than he was letting on. Someone with the ability to control the Biju cannot be underestimated. Good, because this conversation has only just begun. I think we can exchange some useful information, and I believe you also have something to say, Naruto added, initiating a long conversation. Well, he managed to defeat Raikage. This was just a new challenge. Naruto left the Tsuchikage's office satisfied. He wasn't quite as optimistic as the Raikage. After all, he still had to pay for the hotel and everything else if he wanted to stay in the area, but at least his passport was useful, just as easily as the Raikage had provided it. Thinking about this, he headed to the hotel while the Tsuchikage and Kuratsuchi waited for him to close the door, so they could continue their conversation without the blonde boy present. Grandpa, are you sure about this? I know he gave quite a bit of information, but... His granddaughter said uncertainly, but the old man seemed satisfied with the blonde man's conversation. On the other hand, the information given about the Akatsuki members was worrying. Those registered in the bingo book were S-rank, highly dangerous and ruthless ninjas, but one name stood out more than all the other information combined. Dadara. He would have to think about this matter much more than expected, especially since his own rogue student was involved, all because he denied his art, as he called it. It's only fair. He took a big risk by giving me this information, and he'll also be a link to new sources of information if we keep him close. Likewise, he stood to gain something by telling me, and it's something quite simple even if I don't agree to the terms, Inoki explained. What do you mean? I asked doubtfully. He wants to hinder Akatsuki's progress. The reason that organization has so much freedom and resources is because they maintain secrecy, but if the major nations find out and discreetly manage the information, they'll take measures to make it harder for them to capture future Jinchuriki. At the same time, it will give us the opportunity to attack them and recover our Biju, he announced triumphantly. He's bold but also intelligent. I like the boy. He had to be his son. This truly ignited Kuratsuchi's curiosity. Her grandfather rarely found someone he respected, much less someone who earned his respect in such a short time. From the start, this character named Naruto Uzumaki had intrigued her, seemingly for different reasons, but now she had more to discover and a debt to repay. As a proud kunoichi, she wouldn't allow herself to be left with an unpaid debt. Soon, a sly smile, similar to her grandfather's, appeared on her face as she devised the perfect way to repay her debt, satisfy her curiosity, and, depending on how this plan unfolded, get to know this person better. Upon leaving his office, he went to explore the town looking for the foreigner, which he soon did when he found him leaving the town's hotel. Naruto, meanwhile, wandered on, searching for a place where he could listen to his stomach rumbling without shame or embarrassment. Night was falling, and he hadn't eaten properly since the day before the confrontation with Kabuto. Thinking about his previous dinner made him reflect on his time with Konan and Yugao. It was a shame he'd run into them on his journey from the land of lightning to the land of earth. Their cabin in the land of grass was right on the path, and they hadn't anticipated the coincidence of both Konan and Yugao being there. This set the stage for a perfect night's rest. Perhaps he didn't sleep much, but his activities with them always managed to relax and unwind, no matter how active they were. I hoped I could repeat it soon, pushing those thoughts out of her mind. Otherwise, she'd be thinking about them all night. She returned to her task of finding somewhere to eat dinner. The town's commercial area was quite large, not as large as Kimogakure or Konohagakure, but much bigger than a standard town in a small country. Naruto! The blonde boy turned around at the sound of his name being called by a familiar voice. He found himself face to face with Kuratsuchi again. "I'd be happy to see you again," she said wearily. "Hey, you went to the hospital, right?" He guessed, though his out-of-shape state from exhaustion indicated he hadn't seen a hospital in quite some time. "Kabuto's an expert on the human body. You should have him check you out. And I'm sure you didn't tell your grandfather anything besides what I said, right? Can't you see I'm fine?" she retorted, defending her remaining ninja pride. But as soon as she finished the sentence, she staggered and fainted, only to be caught by the blonde man beside her. It seemed her journey to this place had drained all of the young woman's remaining energy. Kabuto moved at great speed across the land of wind desert, reaching a rocky area near the northern border of the land of wind and the land of rocks. He entered a large underground labyrinth. Not before coughing up blood again, unleashing a violent cough, something that had slowed him down on the way there. This caught his attention, as he hadn't fully recovered from the damage caused by Naruto's Rasengan. Something similar had happened before, but he had studied the situation and its repercussions, and was confident he could remedy it now without further problems. The entire study was flawed from the start. The damage was significantly more severe and somehow different. The patient couldn't recover from the damage easily, as if they couldn't supply chakra to the destroyed cells to initiate accelerated healing. Furthermore, the cells closest to the wound caused by the jutsu were beyond recovery. The technique's unique characteristic was its ability to attack at the cellular level, something that was quite concerning for the doctor. "Orochimaru will not be pleased," he said softly, venturing deeper into the cracks of a passageway that was certainly artificial. Behind him, noticing the man-made structure, an invisible figure watched intently. "I can't believe Jiraiya-sensei's transparency technique is so useful. It's a shame he only uses it to spy on women." Thinking about his discovery of Orochimaru's hideout, the shadow clone dissipated in a puff of smoke, sending the information to the original Naruto in Iwagakure. Two young people left the hospital late at night. Naruto's stomach was still growling, demanding something to eat. Even with the information revealed by his shadow clone, the owner of that body part sighed sadly. "You are stubborn." Although for some reason he had recorded someone, perhaps himself, even if he wouldn't admit it to anyone. "I haven't had dinner yet, and I haven't eaten since yesterday," he complained. "I have a solution for that," Kuratsuchi concluded, looking directly into the blonde man's eyes, once again eliciting the familiar reaction from both of them, confirming the certainty of the dark-haired woman's conclusions. "I'll ask you out on a date," she confirmed with a wry smile. Her grandfather had always told her to take the necessary risks to get what she wanted, and this time she was putting it into practice. The blonde man's eyes widened. "Ha!" His scream was heard throughout Iwagakure. Chapter 11. From Complications to Solutions. Exile Chapter 11. From Complications to Solutions. Naruto sighed, gazing out the window of his apartment in Tsunade. While he had reasons to be happy, today wasn't one of those days. Tsunade had been added to his travel itinerary around the elemental countries. He had reunited with old friends here, like Gaara, and made new ones like Kankuro and Temari, even though he hadn't given them the chance in the past. As the current Kazekage and a friend, he readily accepted the information, at least by the standards of the red-haired ninja. From then on, he began his routine of traveling between missions through Kumogakure, Iwagakure, and Tsunade, with brief breaks at his small cabin in the dense forests of Kusagakure. He had many joys during this time. A perfect example is an unexpected encounter a few weeks ago, right here in Tsunade, and it was quite problematic. Naruto was returning to his apartment in Tsunade for a well-deserved rest after a mission with Kankuro when an individual approached from the village entrance. Naruto recognized him even after all this time. The only change was his height. The blonde boy stood frozen, watching him walk toward him without even noticing. He seemed too preoccupied with observing the clouds. "Shikamaru!" Naruto shouted excitedly upon seeing his friend from Konoha. It was fortunate that IM had updated her status a bit in front of everyone in Konoha, because since her departure, Shikamaru, dragged along by Choji, had been visiting Naruto's favorite ramen shop quite often. The boy seemed to notice the call, and curiously approached to ask, "Yes? Who are you?" "Ow! That hurt." "Shikamaru, Databeo," he replied, almost feeling guilty for saying that. It was normal that he didn't recognize her, not because Yugao had changed her previous jacket for a similar one. The only difference, besides the Uzumaki symbol on her back, was the hood covering her head. At the same time, Konan had given him a mask very similar to his sensei Kakashi's. The only visible difference was its black color instead of navy blue, thus matching the rest of his clothes. Initially, he was against it, but Konan managed to convince him, saying that it would make it harder for people to discover he was a Jinchuriki because of his fox-like sideburns, and it would also be a great help during his now frequent trips across the Tsunade desert, blocking the sand from his mouth. "Databeo?" he repeated incredulously. The blonde enjoyed every second as Shikamaru's face contorted with surprise. In response, Naruto pulled back his hood and lowered his mask, revealing his trademark fox-like grin. "Naruto, it's been a while, Shikamaru," the blonde replied. He was surprised to learn that Shikamaru was in charge of the negotiations between Konohagakure and Tsunade for the Chunin exams. It was a friendly, long, and steady chat, discussing the status of Naruto's remaining friends in the village. The lazy boy noticed the blonde boy's precarious situation regarding Team 7, with the exception of Kakashi, and managed to talk about him and all the former rookies of his generation, as well as their respective Jonin-sensei, Irika-sensei, and Tsunade. But then Naruto noticed something rather peculiar. The lazy genius blamed himself for his banishment, since it was thanks to the mission in which he was the team leader that Naruto's fate was decided. "Did you banish me?" the blonde man asked angrily. "No, but it's my responsibility. It was me who—" Shikamaru was interrupted again. "Did you vote for my banishment?" Naruto insisted with another question. "No," I answered sharply. "Then you have nothing to apologize for," the blonde boy stated with a smile, placing a hand on Shikamaru's shoulder in support. Without a doubt, when Naruto saw Shikamaru returning to Konoha, he left with a huge weight lifted from his shoulders. He had managed to talk with Naruto and clear up his doubts, and he breathed a sigh of relief knowing that his friend was still the same, and more importantly, that he was still his friend. But then the bad news began. Just thinking about it and remembering it filled his face with sadness, knowing that despite his exile, nothing had changed. He discovered this during his first visit to the desert of the Land of Wind, following the route he learned through his shadow clone jutsu while tracking Kabuto. Naruto successfully infiltrated the base of the filthy snake. Undoubtedly, Jiraiya-sensei's lessons in caution, combined with the stealth experience he gained with Team Samui, proved fruitful this time, especially when combined with his own version of his sensei's Totan Jutsu, transparent escape technique. Although Jiraiya's intentions behind this teaching weren't entirely pure, considering he taught it to Naruto, so he would accompany him on his next research trip for his upcoming novel. Naruto obviously refused to go along. By combining it with his dense chakra, he managed to create a much more perfect version than Jiraiya's, who watched this discovery with great envy, particularly with his shadow clones. Naruto thoroughly searched the Konohagakure snake's base, thankfully without him. He found several experiments and files containing past plans, but nothing too significant. Unfortunately, he learned of a substitute body to transfer to, leaving him with only the satisfaction of having thwarted Orochimaru's plans to obtain his ideal body a second time. To his surprise, he found several files on the design and development of the Ten no Juin N/A, Cursed Seal of Heaven, possessed by Sasuke and Anko, and the Chi no Juin N/A, Cursed Seal of Earth, possessed by Kimimaro and more powerful than Sasuke and Anko's. By studying them properly with the help of the stored knowledge of the Uzumaki seals and Jiraiya, he might be able to completely eliminate it instead of just sealing it like Kakashi. Proud of his discovery, the mercenary stored the files inside a storage seal, then continued his inspection of the area. More experiments, more test subjects. Information about a certain Tenzo, the first test subject implanted with the first Hokage cells, functioning optimally. Second implanted, Danzo. Danzo? Where had she heard that name before? The files were old, she was in an old section, and these experiments were from the time before Orochimaru's official betrayal of Konoha. It would be interesting to ask Jiraiya. She decided to continue searching for more recent files going back to the Suna/Odo invasion. But something was off. Information on Konoha? This last detail caught his attention. It contained information about the current ANBU, patrol routes and schedules, the code of the seal surrounding Konoha to evade potential invasions, a list of current ninjas, ranks, and abilities. The blonde frowned. This data was recent, indicating that there was another spy in Konoha working for Orochimaru. Who could it be? Kabuto was ruled out, having been discovered long ago. He soon found his answer and he didn't like it. All he could do was create a copy seal and save the new information, then leave Orochimaru's lair without looking back. He wished he'd never made that discovery. Did I really fail you that day, Sasuke? Naruto thought bitterly. After that event came other, happier ones, more missions, new friendships. He had even started dating two girls. Kuratsuchi, who was quite direct with him in Iwagakure. At first, he was somewhat skeptical, but somehow she reminded him a lot of himself. Then, once he returned to Kumogakure, a rather surprising event occurred. Something he still couldn't understand, revealing that a woman's thoughts would always be a mystery. Team Samui had completed their first mission since Naruto's return. Now, everyone was heading home to rest. They had just completed a B-rank mission, and as was customary for missions of this category, the ninjas were granted days off. Happy to have some time off, Naruto was going to return to his apartment. Naruto! Samui's voice stopped him in his tracks. Curious, he turned to find the young Jonin and team leader watching him. She looked somewhat uneasy and nervous. Can I ask you something? She seemed to curse under her breath, which made the blonde mercenary chuckle. It was amusing to see her so flustered, a change from her usual tranquility. Not wanting to give her any more reason for this strange nervousness, Naruto nodded. Would you want to go on a date with me? The mercenary froze at those words, staring at her. She's asking me out? He thought incredulously. He replayed the question several times, analyzing whether he'd actually heard correctly. Then he analyzed it concretely. Of course, he found Samui attractive, and her personality, despite not knowing her very well, was intriguing. He would certainly like to get to know her a little better. He never imagined she would spark an interest in someone like him. I understand if you don't want to, you're not a ninja from this village and… Samui had begun to turn away, hiding her disappointment in her usually cold face. I didn't say anything like that, Naruto assured her, taking the Jounin ninja's shoulder before she could fully turn around. You just caught me off guard. He quickly cleared up the misunderstanding. Of course I'd like to. She smiled warmly in response. Can you tomorrow? Samui showed only a slight blush with an honest smile, to which Naruto responded in kind. Yes, I'd love to. Naruto smiled slightly, remembering his first date with Samui. It wasn't anything extraordinary. They simply shared a meal and chatted, trying to get to know each other better, and it worked. It was pleasant and fun. Samui didn't smile broadly, barely moving her lips, but it was her eyes that reflected her true emotions, as expressive as her demeanor. Just by looking at them, he could tell if she was happy, angry, sad, calm, or nervous. That first date led to a second, and the second to a third. Through his relationship with Samui, he understood something that had happened in Konoha, something Ino always told Sakura about, Kurenai and Asuma. Samui was discreet and asked Naruto to be discreet as well, not revealing their relationship to others. Not many people discovered it, except for Omoi, who, despite being quite scheming, managed to uncover their relationship, at least for himself. Karui never noticed anything. She was too oblivious in that regard to notice. With Kuratsuchi, it was different. She was very much like him in her attitude. Proud, spontaneous, intelligent, and perhaps as cunning as he was. She wasn't afraid to be herself or hide anything. Their dates were just like her. Spontaneous and joyful. They could joke around and laugh for hours, imagining random things. She lived in her imagination, much like Naruto had as a child, which is perhaps why it brought her so much nostalgia to remember that innocent part of himself that he lost when he left Konoha, as well as his extreme loyalty to the village of Iwa, rivaled only by his own loyalty to Konoha. So this on-again, off-again relationship began during their journey, and in just a couple of months it progressed quite well, to the point where Naruto could no longer hide his intentions regarding her clan. It was at this point that everything fell apart. Double rejection in less than a week. Neither woman believed she could share him with another, and the mercenary's greatest fear became a reality before his very eyes. It hurt. It truly did. And that's why he was so depressed just a week after the double breakup. He felt the emptiness in his heart that he had created for them. It was a horrible pain, one that was even greater than when Sakura rejected him. It's true that on that occasion it hurt not only because he was his teammate, Sakura was also his first love, the first person to occupy both his mind and heart full-time. The person for whom Naruto would have done anything. And in fact, he did, sacrificing his own soul and life when he returned to Sasuke to fulfill that promise. But this was a different kind of pain and a much greater one. It was a double rejection of a relationship that was progressing. He'd never shared a relationship like this with Sakura. She'd never given him that chance, rejecting every single one of his attempts to ask her out. Samui and Kuratsuchi had left a mark on his heart. They'd created a space just for them, a space that was now empty, just as there was a space for Konan and Yugao, unique and irreplaceable. The commercial district where his apartment was located was bustling with life, even though it was early morning and his first day off. He wasn't in the mood to travel or go on any missions. He wanted to be alone, even though the Kazekage's family, the Kazekage himself and his siblings, were coming for lunch in a few hours. Naruto had no desire to cook, despite it being one of his favorite pastimes. He simply wanted to forget everything and lose himself in his memories. Memories of his dates and encounters with Samui and Kuratsuchi. The walks, jokes, laughter, dinners, movies, kisses, hugs, and moments together in general. They hadn't reached the final stage like with Konan and Yugao, but he hadn't because doing so without a commitment would be like deceiving Konan and Yugao, betraying their trust. It was something he wanted to achieve when they learned about his clan, something he did and failed miserably. Now he could only face the consequences. A figure arrived in Tsunade. From deep within the desert, they passed through the gigantic gates of solid rock formed from the sand itself. Guards stood on either side, curious to observe this visitor. The figure was completely covered by turbans, making it impossible to discern their body or gender. "The reason for your visit?" asked one of the Chunin on guard. "A visit from a relative." The voice replied, its raspy quality making it impossible to tell if it belonged to a gentleman or a serious woman. The man handed over his passport. Both of them stared in surprise at the photo it displayed, and after getting over their shock, they returned the passport. "Have a pleasant visit." The Chunin greeted. Nodding, the man made his way into the town. He slowly made his way through the crowd, reaching the commercial district of Tsunade. Carefully, he took a piece of paper from inside his turban, searching for an address. Once he confirmed he was in the right place, he entered an unremarkable building complex, climbing the stairs to the top floor. He walked down the hallway to the third door, the one farthest from the stairs, and knocked 3 times. There was no response. I hit 3 more times. "I'm coming, I'm coming," a voice called from behind the door. With the click of the lock, the door opened, revealing Naruto. "Yes, what can I do for you?" he asked curiously. The man was initially surprised by the blonde man's dejected state, but then he removed his turbans and fabrics, revealing a slender female figure. "Is that how you greet your girlfriend?" asked the now-revealed purple-haired woman. "Yu-chan," Naruto shouted, hugging her tightly around the waist and almost lifting her off the ground. Yugao returned the hug, letting herself be swept away by the blonde boy's affection. Soon he lowered her, stepping back slightly enough to face her, still holding her waist. "What are you doing here?" "Well, someone seemed pretty down in their letters, so I decided to pay a visit to cheer them up. Can you guess who it is?" she asked, slightly annoyed. Naruto smiled this time, kissing her gently, and she, once again, let him lead her by responding. They both moved inside Naruto's home in Tsunade as their kisses grew more intense and passionate. Yugao impatiently closed the door with the heel of her left foot, too preoccupied with the blonde to make sure it was properly shut. On the other hand, this was definitely what the doctor recited to Naruto. He might be upset if we come at this hour," Temari suggested to her brother Kankuro. They were arriving at Naruto's apartment much earlier than expected, several hours before lunchtime, but they had to make sure Naruto was cooking for them. "You know Naruto's been a little down lately. That's why we need to make sure he's doing something, so he doesn't back out at the last minute," Kankuro complained. "He'd better not start with that my makeup nonsense. War paint." He corrected himself, causing Temari to burst out laughing. "So you finally admit it. And here I was thinking of starting to lend you my cosmetics," her older sister mocked. "You know they're not cosmetics," the puppeteer exclaimed. "Stupid, annoying blondes," he muttered, repeating the phrase Shikamaru had used some time ago with both of them. It perfectly described Naruto and Temari's personalities and summed it up well, given that they were both blonde. Temari just laughed a little louder, amused by how easy it was to tease her brother now, all thanks to Naruto. Who would have imagined that this cold and expert puppeteer had such a weakness? His war paint, supposedly for intimidation. The pair froze when they saw the door to what they assumed was Naruto's apartment ajar. Their ninja instincts kicked in, telling them something was wrong. Worried about their friend's well-being, they stealthily entered the apartment without needing to speak. They moved slightly crouched, with Kankuro leading the way since he was technically better suited for close-range attacks, while Temari was a long-range fighter. Most of the apartment's doors were on the left from the entrance in order: pantry, bathroom, bedroom, while on the right, in the same order, were the kitchen, dining room, and living room. The pantry was just a small cupboard, so there was nothing hidden there. The bathroom was empty, and from there you could see that the dining room, living room, and kitchen were also empty. What was worrying were the sounds coming from the bedroom, moans and murmurs. Kankuro was the first to peek out and was instantly petrified. "Kankuro, what's wrong?" Temari whispered to her brother in front of her. "Kankuro," there was no response. "Kankuro." She waited another moment, but there was no response. Slowly pondering this, she peeked out next to Kankuro, equally petrified. Her throat went dry, and a flush rose to her cheeks at the sight. In all his glory and splendor, from Temari's perspective, stood Uzumaki Naruto, naked, sitting on the bed. Above him, however, was an unknown woman with attributes that even the Kazekage's sister envied: long purple hair, and equally naked as her companion. They moved with perfect synchronization, embraced with no space between them, their faces close together as they exchanged a long, passionate, and intimate kiss. Soon their lips parted against their will, gasping for air, but this didn't stop them from trying to make contact. The blonde man quickly pressed his lips to the woman's neck, causing her to let out a moan that sounded like a name. "Naruto!" she cried with all her passion, without breaking her rhythmic movements. "Yu-chan!" Her companion moaned against her neck, clinging tighter to their pressed bodies. She forcefully pulled away with her hands, determined to steal his lips once more, eliciting a long, blissful moan from both of them at the touch. Temari realized what was happening. Acting quickly, she looked at her brother, who, to her utter shame, was leering at the scene. With anger and embarrassment building inside her, The Kazekage's older sister dragged Kankuro out of the apartment, gently closing the door behind her. What the hell is your problem? You were spying on Naruto, for God's sake. Temari yelled angrily. Her shameless brother was drooling slightly from the corner of his mouth. Everything indicated that he was thinking about the woman who was currently with Gaara's blonde friend. Kankuro, she exclaimed again indignantly. Ugh. Speak for yourself, you pervert. The puppeteer finally complained in response, coming to his senses. Ha! She blurted out hesitantly, as her brother pointed under her nose. Curious, she brought her hand to that spot, finding blood that proved she wasn't as pure or virtuous as she wanted to appear. Of course, after seeing Naruto naked, things changed in perspective, and with those movements, ah! She screamed in horror at the unconscious perverted thoughts that slowly filled her mind. Grumbling several times, Temari left the building, unable to avoid the scenes she had witnessed, even if only for a few brief seconds. Meanwhile, his brother chuckled without fear or shame as he replayed the scenes he had seen. Naruto looked back on the past few days with joy in his heart, a stark contrast to the utter depression he'd felt just 3 days prior. Yugao had returned to her duties, but she'd left them both with new memories. They'd had the chance to act like a normal couple, strolling through the village without needing to hide, enjoying all the village had to offer on an afternoon of complete leisure in each other's company. It was something he longed to repeat in the near future. It should also be mentioned that he had the opportunity to introduce Yugao to his friends in Sunagakure. Gaara seemed happy, by his standards, to be introduced to one of Naruto's future wives. Temari and Kankuro, on the other hand, seemed quite uncomfortable during dinner, and something in the blonde's mind told him not to ask about it. There were still 4 days left of his self-imposed vacation, and without Yugao it would definitely be sadder. He had to find a way to distract himself from the recent depressing events. But it seemed the answer knocked on his door, literally. Curious, Naruto opened it to find another figure covered in turbans, but unlike last time, this time he was prepared. His amber eyes revealed his identity to the experienced blonde. With a swift movement of her hands, she removed the mysterious figure's bothersome turbans, revealing his blue hair and pale skin, conveniently concealed by the robes. Smiling, the second visitor in less than a week kissed Naruto, who happily returned the gesture. It seemed Konan had also detected Naruto's depression in his letters and made an effort to find time to visit and care for him. Using her right heel, Konan closed the apartment door, or at least tried to as they stood together, but neither of them was in the mood or interested in searching. The exploration of his lips, however, seemed far more promising, hinting at something more than just lips. Unfortunately, on this day, the Kazekage's brothers came again to check on Naruto. I did it, Naruto thought triumphantly after finishing his conversation with the Tsuchikage. Now it was just a matter of getting to the hotel to rest and trying to stay hidden enough to carry out another mission without Kuratsuchi discovering him. He wouldn't know how to react to her, and he wasn't in the mood for a conversation. Naruto placed his hand on the doorknob to open the door. He was surprised when he almost flew off, door and all. He didn't remember being so strong or even activating Sage Mode. Unfortunately, he soon discovered why, as at the same time, the door had been opened from the outside, bringing him face to face with Kuratsuchi, precisely the one person in this village he wanted to avoid at all costs. Naruto, the Tsuchikage's granddaughter whispered in surprise as she saw him face to face. Kuratsuchi, the blonde boy replied sadly. See you, he said without thinking much. And with that, he left at great speed, while the young woman watched him go sadly. It was too painful to see her, and seeing those eyes was even worse. She walked faster than usual, fast enough so no one would say she was running, but not too slow so she could get to the hotel quickly and escape all of this. Naruto! She heard the blonde man behind her, letting out a soft, low murmur. Against her will, or perhaps because her feet compelled her, she stopped. Naruto! The blonde man didn't turn around at her call. She was the one who stepped between him and her hotel. The mercenary, however, kept his eyes on the ground. Naruto, please look at me, she demanded. With some hesitation, he lifted his head to meet those eyes he now only saw in dreams. What's wrong? he asked uncertainly. He had no idea how to act. Should he be angry? His own heart was racing. He didn't like this uncomfortable feeling. "I'm sorry," she said, staring at him. The blonde boy tried to look away, trying not to see those dark eyes, but she stopped him, using her right hand to prevent his head from moving. The blonde boy looked at her with obvious fear, and she noticed. "I'm sorry, Naruto. I told you that you have nothing to regret. It's my fault." But she put her hand to her mouth. Any other woman would have put her finger to it, but Kuratsuchi wasn't the most feminine of the kunoichi. "No, it isn't. It must be more painful to be forced into marriage when the law dictates it, and I can understand that. You didn't seek to be the last of your clan, but you carry the responsibility for all of them on your shoulders. We are ninjas. Our clans carry prestige, as does the legacy they leave us." I explained in detail. "I thought about it since last time, and I don't like how it ended. I'm proudly like my grandfather. I like to take risks. I'll be doomed if I don't take this risk, or I'll spend my whole life thinking about what could have been." I explained quickly. "I want to try, Naruto, to be part of your clan." Naruto watched her, impressed. It was true that they had come a long way on an emotional level, and for that reason, he had explained his intentions with her clan. But during his time away from Iwagakure, he had lost hope of continuing this relationship. He truly liked Kuratsuchi. He was even beginning to love her, which was why he was so afraid of her. Now, hope was slowly returning as he observed the black pearls in Kuratsuchi's eyes that normally shone with joy, cunning, and loyalty, but now twinkled with uncertainty and fear. He never expected to see her in this state of utter fear and doubt. "Really, Kuratsuchi?" he asked, almost incredulous. This was too good to be true for the blonde boy. A smile slowly began to appear on his face, mirrored by the kunoichi of this village. Soon, the blonde boy was embraced by her, and he gladly returned the affectionate gesture. It was strangely satisfying to hug her. Strange because he didn't have the impediment of a certain developed anatomy like his other two girlfriends. "Thank you, Koro-chan." He sighed with simple, unadulterated joy. She suddenly pulled away. "But it'll only be one chance, just one," she reiterated firmly, to which Naruto nodded seriously. Soon, a genuine smile returned to her face as she hugged him again. "Well, I guess for now I'll just have to get used to being an Uzumaki Naruto," she replied mischievously. "Huh? What do you mean?" the blonde man asked doubtfully. The question answered itself, as Kuratsuchi was kissing the blonde man's lips directly. He practically melted at the soft touch of the raven-haired woman's playful lips on his own, filling him with a warmth that was both familiar and yet so different. The couple vaguely heard a whistle, reminding them that they were in a public space, specifically outside the town's hotel. Amused by this emotion slowly spreading within her, Kuratsuchi watched the blonde man. "What if we continue in your room?" I asked with a slight mischievousness, and perhaps some hidden nervousness in my voice. I think I like the idea," Naruto replied in the same tone. Smiling at the situation, feeling the excitement of what was to come, Kuratsuchi took the blonde's hand, pulling him toward the hotel, specifically to the room where the blonde was staying. Between kisses and laughter, the couple climbed the stairs, reaching the bedroom already in the middle of things. Naruto clumsily inserted the key into the lock, amidst Kuratsuchi's anticipation and passionate kisses. Taking almost 3 times longer than usual, they entered the room, stumbling over everything in their path. They began to shed the clothes that hindered their next intentions. By the time they reached the bed, they were only in their underwear. Naruto settled on top of Kuratsuchi, both of them lying on the bed. He ran his fingers through her hair, and she, for her part, greatly enjoyed the tender touch. But for her, it was time to stop being tender. Now the real action began. "I hope that Jinchuriki resilience can be applied to other things," the kunoichi whispered seductively in the blonde's ear, letting her soft breath do almost all the work of seduction. Naruto initially twitched slightly at the anticipation of his breath against her skin, and his tone of voice wasn't helping matters. "In that case, you'll have to be pretty sure," he replied, playing along with his girlfriend. And so he kissed her deeply, Kuratsuchi giving free rein to the tongue of her, now lover. The first time they would both confirm their feelings, she let out a moan like never before, becoming the recipient of the blonde's affections. She was fired up, grabbing the blonde's neck and pulling him to the side, forcing him to let her straddle him, and worse, putting her in control. Get ready for a ride like no other. Kuratsuchi thrust her hips against Naruto's crotch, causing them both to let out another moan and igniting a night of passion, the first of many more. Naruto awoke to the sensation of several wet spots on his body. Fully regaining his senses, he opened his eyes and realized it was Kuratsuchi who had been kissing him since early morning. Amused, Naruto took her in his arms, beginning a new kissing contest between them. Reaching a climax, they settled back together, the kunoichi from a Wagakure sleeping on Naruto's chest. It was astonishing how a person's life could change in a single night. Months of dates and meetings had led to this moment of pure bliss. A potential new member of his clan, someone who would earn his eternal affection, was now resting in his arms, offering a new, dark version of waking up, a stark contrast to the usual purple and/or blue awakenings. Felt wonderful, and I wanted it to last forever. Poof! The sound of a puff of smoke caught their attention, and they saw a messenger toad at the foot of the bed. Unfazed by the sight of the two young people partially undressed, the toad handed Naruto a messenger scroll before vanishing in a second puff of smoke. What was that? Kuratsuchi asked. A message. Yes. Naruto opened the scroll, reviewing its contents, causing a low groan. I must go to Kumogakure. The Raikage is calling me. He sighed sadly. Kuratsuchi responded by clinging even tighter to his arm beneath the comfortable hotel bed. Really? Kuratsuchi asked in a fake voice, starting to place several kisses on Naruto. And is it important? Kukuro-chan, he stammered. You know I wouldn't want to leave if it wasn't important. Ah. He let out an involuntary moan as his dark-haired girlfriend used her hand to press a certain part of his groin, which was rapidly gaining ground. Are you sure? She asked again, her tone flirtatious, this time kissing him on the lips. Because now I have more important plans, and they involve you. Naruto knew at that moment that he was in a battle he couldn't win, but one he could use to speed things up a little. With a swift movement, he scooped Kuratsuchi up in his arms and carried her out of bed toward the bathroom. I don't have time to waste in bed, but that doesn't mean we can't have some fun while I get ready. Tabeo, he whispered, closing the bathroom door behind him. She eagerly began kissing him as he struggled to run the shower. They might not have wasted any time lying down, but all the time Naruto had hoped to save in bed he'd spent in the shower. Naruto arrived in the distant lands of Kumogakure, as far as Iwagakure could see. He presented his passport to the guards at the entrance without any trouble. Without wasting any time, he wanted to resolve the doubt the Raikage had instilled in him. He offered no reasons, circumstances, or missions. He simply wanted to be there. He arrived quickly, knowing the village like the back of his hand. My name is Raikage-sama? Naruto asked, reporting to the front. Ah, Naruto, the Raikage said with a smile. The time has come, he said, almost impatiently. He rarely saw the Raikage so excited except for something involving a fight. I believe you have earned the respect and trust necessary for your training with my brother. Training with his brother? He asked doubtfully. When had Naruto ever asked for training with the Raikage's brother? That's right, Killer B. Well, he's busy right now, and I think Yujito-ni also asked to be at the event, so it'll be until next week. He continued his explanation, maintaining his enthusiasm from the start. But all this conversation rather bewildered the blonde boy. Killer B? The Jinchuriki who controls the Biju's power perfectly, he exclaimed, almost euphoric, remembering that he was also Team Samui's sensei. But all positive thoughts stopped when he recalled a recent comment from the village leader. Did he say event? He remembered doubtfully. That's right, the village leader proclaimed with authority and confidence. Mabui, beside him, sighed, making it clear to the blonde that this behavior from A was typical of him. It's said that high-level fighters can be easily understood through their fists alone. Naruto experienced a sense of déjà vu, recalling the same words coming from Sasuke's mouth. That's why I want to fight you, to see what you're made of and to discern your intentions. So you, the Raikage, want to fight me, a mere mercenary ninja? He said hesitantly. Well, the audacious part of Naruto screamed to fight him, to drag him across the ground like the hulking mass he was. The other part, the part called common sense that Jiraiya had practically whipped into him, told him to run and hide in the highlands. No, I don't want to face a mere mercenary ninja. I want to face Jiraiya's apprentice and the son of Kiroi Senko, who also happens to be the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. That ninja I've been talking about all over my village, I proclaimed with an air of respect. Besides, everyone is eagerly awaiting this event. Wait, what? He cried out in horror. Does everyone know about this? Killer Bee gave tickets to Omoi and Karui to distribute to the entire village, confessed the Raikage, somewhat annoyed by his brother's greedy attitude, although I think he also wants to put on some stupid concert after the battle. He's been locked away all day searching for rhymes ever since I told him my idea to face off against Naruto. Damn rapper. He thought the last part resentfully. And what if I said no? A strange silence fell over the room, as if the room itself were asking him, You refuse a battle against the Raikage? I understand. I accept the final test, he replied, now calmer, swallowing the fact that he would be facing one of the legends of the 5 great ninja nations. It was something he found easy enough to accept. Perhaps his childhood encounters with Gaara, Orochimaru, and Kisame/Itachi had slightly altered his sense of awe. Everything's settled then. Team Samui will tell you the day, location, and time of the event. Following this announcement, the aforementioned group, of which Naruto was a member, appeared at the Raikage's office. Naruto raised his hand, greeting the members cheerfully. Omoi and Karui returned the greeting, though both Naruto and Samui acted somewhat strangely after their entrance. That's all then. You may leave. Naruto was calmly returning to his apartment in Kumogakure after chatting at length with Karui and Omoi, having fulfilled the Raikage's requests. Everything indicated that their meeting was a week away, so he needed to get everything in order. Electrical energy levels, seals, and other minor details. Thinking about all of this, he arrived at his apartment and found someone unexpected at his door. Samui, the blonde man said, somewhat unsure of what to say. Would the situation with Kuratsuchi repeat itself? He highly doubted it. Samui had made it quite clear that she wasn't going to continue the relationship. What's wrong? He asked, standing in front of her by the door. Naruto, murmured the jounin from Kumogakure. The young woman observed him seriously, a trace of doubt and sorrow in her eyes. If there was one thing Naruto had learned during his time with her, it was how to read her emotions. I know my decision hurt you, and I think I made a mistake by rushing into it, he confessed in an expressionless tone. I had time to think about it, and you left a void in me, one I didn't have before. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the analogy. I'm a highly trained kunoichi. I never let my emotions rule me. I was driven by my ninja career. I wanted to be strong and someone respected, which prevented me from having a relationship. I refused, although now I think differently. It's not that I refused to have a relationship. It's that the right person never came into my life. Samui, he murmured in surprise. You're that person. I never wanted to feel the warmth of someone next to me, the warmth of an embrace, the softness of a kiss. I never wanted any of that until you came into my life. Samui continued her attempt at a serious face, but her eyes betrayed tears. At this point, I don't care if I have to share you. I don't care if you're not from my village. I ruined the only chance I had to feel loved, the only chance I had to feel more human, more of a woman than a kunoichi. Samui lowered her head to the ground as her mask slowly shattered. Soon the young kunoichi felt surrounded by the warmth she had missed so much. When she lifted her head, she realized she was in Naruto's arms. Continuing her tears, she snuggled closer to the mercenary's head. She inhaled deeply the scent she had missed so much. This was what made her heart beat again. This was what it felt like to be loved. You don't have to apologize, Naruto replied. You also left a void in me that I couldn't fill, an irreplaceable place in my heart. Naruto gazed at Samui's face. It's not fair that I can't give myself to you, just for you. I just want you to be happy, he answered, gently wiping the tears from her eyes. You already make me happy. With that, they gazed at each other, enjoying the warmth. But at some point, Samui captured Naruto's lips with her own in a simple and sincere kiss. That softness so delightful to the touch and that warmth that filled her lungs and heart. In that moment, Samui was selfish. She wanted more than just a kiss, and she deepened it, letting herself be carried away by new feelings and exploring them. She wanted more of that addictive warmth her boyfriend gave her. Naruto responded to the kiss in kind, but he didn't expect her to corner him against the wall during her deep exploration. He couldn't help but moan at the relentless contact. But she kept thrusting into him, demanding more with her body. And the worst part was, the mercenary knew what that more meant. In a somewhat abrupt move on his part, Naruto managed to separate Samui long enough to open the apartment door, leaving them alone as the sole witnesses on a night where they would proclaim their love on a much more intimate level. Omoi and Karui were leaving the apartment complex where Samui and her brother, Atsui, lived. It was strange. Atsui had just returned from a mission and found the apartment empty, which alarmed the two members of Team Samui. Normally, their leader left a note when he went to train. Perhaps Atsui misplaced the note, Omoi concluded. Or perhaps it was kidnapped overnight by an army of mercenaries for ransom. Or perhaps it got lost on its way back to its apartment last night. The wreckage might also have given it a last-minute mission. For once, I'll conclude with you on that last one, Karui replied, interrupting Omoi's string of theories. But if that were the case, why didn't she call us? We're also part of the same team. That left them both thinking for a few moments. Perhaps we could use Naruto's Sage Mode to find her. Remember that tracking mission? He found those rogue ninja in just a few moments. Yes, that could be it. In any case, we need to meet so he can begin his preparations to face Reikage-sama. Omoi simplified. You're right about that again. Weird. I added, now gesturing towards Naruto's apartment. In a few minutes, they reached the rock structure from the outside and began climbing the stairs. Maybe Samui is with Naruto. They could have slept together, Omoi added upon reaching Naruto's apartment, which made Karui laugh. Naruto and Samui? Are you kidding me? If so, then I'm the Hokage, the redhead replied on the verge of collapse. Still laughing, she banged on Naruto's door a few times. Nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to see. In a few minutes, the door opened, revealing Samui wearing both a black t-shirt and boxers. The black t-shirt was suspiciously similar to the one Naruto wore, which caused both Omoi and Karui's jaws to drop wide. It's a bit early to be bothering people on a day off. That was Samui's quick reply, closing the door behind her without bothering to look at the pair of individuals who were frozen in place with their mouths open as she closed it. With a sigh, Samui went to the apartment's main bedroom and lay down next to the man, who was still asleep, or at least he tried to be, as the blonde woman's coming and going woke him. Who was it? He asked, hugging the woman who was snuggling up next to him, trying to regain the warmth she'd lost on this cold morning in Kumogakure. No one important, she replied simply before yawning again and returning to sleep in the comfort and warmth of her lover. He chuckled, giving her a quick kiss on the lips before continuing her long-awaited sleep with one of the best companions in the world, rivaled only by Yugao, Konan, and Kuratsuchi. Meanwhile, at the door of Naruto's apartment. Did Hokage-sama say something?